heads and 10 horns, and on his horns 10 crowns, and on his heads a blasphemous name. Welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Revelation 13 podcast. I'm your host, Mike Hopwood. In this episode, we will be reviewing some of the defining news stories of 2012 and beyond. The U.S. 2012 elections have come and gone, with Barack Obama securing re-election, and Congress remaining unchanged, with Republicans in control of the House of Representatives and Democrats retaining control of the Senate. Many pundits are now saying that America has now reached the tipping point, where those dependent on government assistance and those who have a socialistic view of government now outnumber those who don't, thus shifting the political landscape and possibly irreversibly changing the spirit and character of the American people. I don't necessarily believe that we are at the tipping point. I like to look at events with a feeling of hope and optimism, that things will improve. But you can't sugarcoat the potential implications of the election. The U.S. could be a totally different nation by the time 2016 rolls around. The socialist takeover of the country could be completed by then, and America will be just like Europe, or worse. At what point does the constitutional rights of the people get thrown out for the collective good? Obama may accomplish what the Soviets and communists could not directly do. Changes from a constitutional republic, with capitalism as the backbone of our economy, to something else, fundamentally changing America, and not to something better. Prophetically speaking, this change may have been inevitable. Many students of Bible prophecy have speculated that America would disappear as a world power to make way for the Antichrist kingdom, whether it was a New World Order global power or a regional shift to Europe, or even to the Middle East. Economically, things in America, at best, will get slightly better, and at worst, disintegrate into another depression, which we may already be in the middle of. Obama is not likely to support the policies that have led to economic prosperity that have worked in the past. He will likely continue his own socialistic ideas when it comes to economic recovery policies. If we are close to Christ's return, we may soon know the answer to the prophetic speculation about America. The idea of America's fall stems from the belief that there is no direct, overt reference to the U.S. in the Bible, specifically in proximity to end times prophecy. This, of course, is not universally accepted. There are some that believe that there are valid references to the United States. Most likely, the United States will not disappear as a nation, but its political influence in the world as well as its military capacity may diminish to the point of only being able to handle its own affairs, or even maybe a sense of letting the UN or some other power handle world affairs. We certainly have a president now who probably wouldn't mind that. But what might be the future events that force the United States into decline? The most likely culprit is the sluggish economy and continued debt spending, which could lead to hyperinflation as well as a prolonged recession or depression. These conditions can lead to riots similar to what has been going on in Greece. A natural disaster also could diminish the United States' place in the world, if it was severe enough, such as the Yellowstone supervolcano or massive earthquakes that can drastically alter the infrastructure of the country. Meteor impacts, tidal waves, and solar EMPs could potentially cripple the United States. The unsettling aspect of civil war tearing the country apart could also be a possibility. As the nation moves away from the Constitution and founding principles, it may trigger a backlash and erupt into a bitter fight for America's future, a fight with no winners, and one that could give the New World Order control of the country, either by martial law or by the suppression of those who cling to God, guns, and the Constitution. In November of 2012, the UN voted to grant a Palestinian state inside the boundaries of Israel, a move that the Palestinian Authority has been craving for many years. The United Nations did not go as far as giving them full membership into the UN, just observer status. There's very little difference in the distinction of observer and full member, and they are likely to get full membership at some point in the future. As the peace process or aftermath of a conflict plays out. The only other observer member is the Vatican in Rome. This event has the potential to cause the Middle East to erupt into war. It gives the Palestinians a legitimate claim to Israeli territory, which they may decide to take by force if political negotiations fail. It was by a similar UN vote that birthed Israel as a country again in 1947, but the decree itself was not what established Israel's independence. It was the overcoming of their enemies in war, when they were immediately attacked after they declared their existence as a country. But the United Nations vote gave them legitimacy on the world stage, and this in effect is what the Palestinians wanted and received. This is now the legal launching point for any war directed against Israel by the Palestinians or their surrounding neighbors who would come to liberate their Arab brothers. The book of Daniel references the Antichrist taking a portion of Israel and the city of Jerusalem. He does not take control of all of Israel. This may be because of Israel's nuclear and military might, or maybe it's because his initial plan is to liberate lands deemed to be a Palestinian state, the West Bank and part of Jerusalem, and force the creation of the state by military conquest like Israel did in 1947. If a lightning-quick invasion occurred and takes control over the West Bank and East Jerusalem and stops there, Israel may not have the political support of the world to take it back. This could lead to a possible peace agreement between the Antichrist and the Israelis, with the rebuilding of a Jewish temple as a provision. Of course, the division of Israel and Jerusalem could come by peaceful means, through the current peace talk efforts. Bible prophecy gives us a series of events that will happen in the tribulation, but it does not give us exact details as to how they play out. This can be frustrating to some, but to others trying to piece the puzzles together is a fascinating experience. On December 14th, 2012, in the early hours of the day, an insidious attack occurred on helpless children at Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown, Connecticut. Adam Lanza, 20-year-old son to Nancy Lanza, sometime before 9:30 a.m., shot his mother in the head 4 times as she laid in her bed. Adam Lanza then took several of his mother's firearms and, for reasons unknown, drove to Sandy Hook Elementary School, 5 miles away, and broke in. Initial reports said that his mother had worked there, as well as saying that Lanza had an altercation with several of the teachers there. These reports could not be confirmed. Lanza shot his way through a locked glass door at the front of the school and was confronted by the school principal and psychologist. After shooting them, Lanza injured 2 more teachers before focusing on 2 classrooms of first graders, killing their teachers and shooting 20 of the children. When Lanza noticed he was spotted by a policeman who entered the school, he killed himself with a shot to the front of his head from a handgun. As the police picked up the pieces, they would determine that Lanza had killed 27 people and wounded 2 before he took his own life. The nation would be stunned by the sheer brutality of a person who could blazingly gun down children. Reports would state that Adam Lanza suffered from a personality disorder, autism, and later classified as Asperger's syndrome. Immediately, the news networks were calling for more gun control and putting blame on the incident, from everything to video games to his mother's interest in guns. Several other news stories were calling Adam Lanza a kid, even though he was a grown man of 20 years old. Blame was being placed on everything but the person responsible for the act, Adam Lanza himself. Strangely enough, they took DNA samples from his body to look for an evil gene, as if evil itself could be categorized as a bad genetic disorder. Evil forces were involved in the shooting, but they emanated from Lanza's own choices. Not surprisingly, reports surfaced of Lanza's devil worship and internet site dedicated to the devil. Many of America's mass killings tend to show some signs of satanic influences. These influences don't absolve the perpetrators from their crimes. They just show that, like Cain, they surrendered to homicidal violence. Another factor in this tragedy is the use of psychotropic drugs by the murderer. Virtually every school shooting, from Columbine to the Joker movie theater killings, all were on some type of mood-altering drug. In society today, it is very easy for a person to legally obtain and continually use these types of drugs. Many have warnings of abnormal behavior with use. The drugs do not cure a person of their problems. It just covers their symptoms, and in some cases pushes them over the edge. November of 2012 saw a press release from the Bigfoot DNA project headed by Melba Ketchum. The 5-year study, which revolves around alleged samples of Bigfoot DNA, has apparently yielded some interesting results. According to the scientists involved, they believe that they can confirm that the creature, Bigfoot or Sasquatch, as it is known, exists, and it is a hybrid species of humans and an unknown primate that they say may have arose 15,000 years ago. The mitochondrial DNA of the Bigfoot sample is from modern human females, and its nuclear DNA is from an unknown primate species. The team was able to sequence 3 complete Bigfoot genomes and would be able to rule out Neanderthals and other supposed evolutionary relatives to man as being the non-human contributor to the DNA. If these DNA results are accurate, it now gives those investigating the Bigfoot mystery some answers into the origins and nature of this creature, as well as giving credence to stories of sexual contact with women and these creatures. And it also gives us a fixed scientific marker to identify future DNA evidence. Ms. Ketchum used the press release to promote her idea that the creatures are an endangered people and are human with constitutional rights and should be protected. A long-standing debate in the Bigfoot community is whether or not to kill one to prove it exists. It's almost an absurd argument. You need a physical specimen for the scientific community to study, and ideally you're not likely to be able to capture one alive. It would be extremely dangerous considering their strength and speed, and any animal that feels cornered and threatened will attack if it can't run away. The DNA evidence might get some of the scientific community to begrudgingly admit they may exist, but in the end, they will need a body. Also, it's a great leap to suggest that these creatures are human, merely because part of their DNA is human in origin. They are humanoid and human-like, but it's been observed that they don't exhibit any more intelligence than apes and other animals do. The argument of what constitutes human and non-human is surely to become a highly debated topic, as modern science is now creating its own hybrid animals and people, and at some point, legal decisions will be made on the rights of these hybrids and their standing under the law. But what can the DNA evidence tell us about these creatures and their possible beginnings? We have an unidentified animal that began as an ape-like creature that was genetically close enough to be bred with the human population. Further study may indicate if the non-human DNA had humanoid aspects before the hybridization process or after, when a hybrid child passed on its genetic code to others. Depending on people's background and point of view, they will interpret the evidence in different ways. A scientist who believes in evolution would probably look at the unknown DNA as an offshoot of evolution or the missing link, and group it with the Neanderthal and other supposed evolutionary links. Scientists now say they have some DNA proof of Neanderthals interbreeding with modern man. Initially, when the first DNA studies of the Neanderthal were done, no trace of it was found in modern human DNA. This was totally unexpected, because evolutionists believed that Neanderthal were a link in the evolution of man. In recent years, they say they have found trace DNA in small pockets of the population, mostly concentrated in Europe. But the difference between Neanderthals and man aren't that great. If you've seen any modern recreations of them, based on their skeletal structure, they don't look like subhumans, as they have long been depicted in the past. Rather, they look human, and likely are. A Bigfoot is vastly different from humans. It's essentially a type of ape with some human attributes. Some could speculate that these creatures are proof of genetic engineering. At some point in the past, someone was mixing animals with man and creating hybrids. There are many legends and ancient texts that state that this was happening in past times, and the Bigfoot DNA study may be the smoking gun that proves it. The theories as to who or what may have made these creatures could probably fill a book, but in a nutshell, it would revolve around the concepts of fallen angels, aliens, advanced ancient civilizations, and covert government projects. Obviously, more studies need to be done to possibly determine the details of the creature's genetic changes and possibly get a better understanding of its human DNA. Finding which racial group or area the female DNA hails from would go a long way in determining the origins of the creature, either in the distant past or a more modern event. Evidence seems to point to a time early in the history of man, but with the level of genetic engineering that we have today, someone deciding to create a hybrid based on Bigfoot accounts is not totally out of the question. And if human DNA could be found to be more recent, or a match to someone involved in the DNA study, it could prove the evidence was contaminated. The study claims to have screened people's DNA and accounted for this, but you can't totally rule out contamination, due to the fact that the samples found could have already been contaminated before Bigfoot researchers found them. The study, not surprisingly, remains uncorroborated by the scientific community, and it is not likely to be. It seems we are at the same point we were before the study came out. We have intriguing evidence of a man-like creature existing in our wild, but no body or physical remains to prove to the scientific community that these animals exist. Bigfoot hunters will continue to hunt for the evidence, and the scientific community will continue to doubt the evidence, and we will continue to study the mystery of these creatures. The election of Pope Francis I to the papacy may signal the soon return of Jesus Christ and the beginning of the tribulation. The predictions of St. Malachi and others suggesting that indeed we have now seen the last pope elected before the final stage of man's rule of earth ends. The main prophecy starts with St. Malachi, the 12th century Archbishop of Ireland, who allegedly saw a vision of the final 112 popes in around 1139 AD. Malachi went to Rome to see Pope Innocent II. While there, he had a vision of the remaining popes. He would describe each pope with a short Latin phrase that would have some cryptic meaning to the identity of the future pope. The prophecy was allegedly put into the Vatican's secret vault until 1595, when it was published by Benedictine monk Arnold Wyon in his book Lignum Vitae. As with any prophecy, there are those who believe in its legitimacy and those who dismiss it altogether, and the prophecy of the popes is no exception to the rule. I greatly recommend to anyone interested in an in-depth study of Malachi's prophecy and why it's probably legitimate to read Petrus Romanus by Chris Putnam and Tom Horn. Their research on this subject is second to none and is a very interesting read. The descriptions of the last three popes seem to be very accurate, and while not the only accurate predictions, these are the three we'll be looking at. Pope John Paul II became pope in 1978 and ruled until his death in 2005. At his funeral there was a solar eclipse occurring, as well as one on the day he was born, on the 18th of May 1920. Malachi's description for Pope John Paul II was, "From the labor of the sun." Malachi's prediction for Pope John Paul II's successor was "glory of the olive." Pope Benedict XVI took his name from Saint Benedict of Nursia, the founder of the Benedictine order. Saint Benedict in 529 AD founded a dozen autonomous monasteries which operated under a group of rules presided by Saint Benedict, an offshoot group from the Benedictine Confederation in 1344 formed under the name of the Order of Our Lady of Mount Olive, also known as the Olivetans. This connects Benedict XVI to the glory of the olive moniker ascribed to him by the Malachi prophecy. While some may think that the link is not strong enough, the nature of the small Latin phrases given in the prophecy describe aspects of the Pope's given name or his Pope name, coat of arms, or place of birth. This fits the pattern. Also, Benedict was well aware of the Malachi prophecy, and he had total discretion in choosing his own Pope name. and could have easily chosen a name with absolutely no connection to olives. For whatever reason, he chose not to, which leads us to the last pope given by Malachi. In the final persecution of the Holy Roman Church, there will sit Peter the Roman, who will pasture his sheep in many tribulations. And when these things are finished, the city of 7 hills will be destroyed, and the dreadful judge will judge his people. The end. The implication is that this pope will preside through all or part of the tribulation. Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, in their book Petrus Romanus, predicted it was likely that Benedict would resign the papacy around April 2012, if not then shortly into 2013. These instincts were spot on. February 11th, 2013, Benedict told the world that he would formally resign on the 28th of February, citing his deteriorating strength due to old age as his main reason for leaving. Although the scandals that have erupted around him in recent years most certainly must have been a deciding factor also. Jorge Mario Bergoglio was elected Pope March 13th, 2013, making him the 266th Pope of the Catholic Church and the last one mentioned on the list of popes by Malachi. Again, the prophecy has seemed to be accurate one more time. The prophecy watchers expected the final pope to be of Italian descent, or at the very least have the name Peter associated with him. Several of the leading cardinals met that bill, but in the end a dark horse won. Bergoglio was not high on anyone's list to win the papacy, but the son of Italian immigrants won the votes needed on the last day of the conclave. He named himself Francis I, after Francis of Assisi. Francis of Assisi was an Italian Catholic friar, born in 1181, who founded several orders known as Franciscans. Francis of Assisi was the first person known to be afflicted with stigmata in a documented case. Stigmata is the condition of a person suffering wounds on the body that correspond to the wounds suffered by Jesus Christ during his crucifixion. These wounds are not thought to be self-inflicted and come and go. Thoughts on its cause range from psychosis, disease, and the supernatural. On September 14th, 1224 AD, while in the midst of praying and fasting, Francis had a vision. In his vision he saw a seraphim, a 6-winged angel, on a cross. This angel gave him the gift of the 5 wounds of Christ. Francis would suffer from the condition for the rest of his life, and when he was close to death in 1226 AD, years later, he began dictating his spiritual testaments, and also a prophecy of sorts of the future, when the Catholic Church would be controlled by a false leader. He wrote, "The time is fast approaching in which there will be great trials and afflictions, perplexities and dissensions, both spiritual and temporal, will abound. The charity of many will grow cold, and the malice of the wicked will increase. The devil will have unusual power. The immaculate purity of our order and of others will be so much obscured that there will be very few Christians who will obey the true sovereign pontiff and the Roman Church with loyal hearts and perfect charity. At the time of this tribulation, a man not canonically elected will be raised to the pontificate, who by his cunning will endeavor to draw many into error and death. Then the scandals will be multiplied. Our order will be divided, and many others will be entirely destroyed, because they will consent to error instead of opposing it. There will be such diversity of opinions and schisms among the people, the religious and the clergy, that except these days were shortened according to the words of the gospel, even the elect would be led into error, were they not specially guided amid such great confusion by the immense mercy of God. Then our rule and manner of life will be violently opposed by some, and terrible trials will come upon us. Those who are found faithful will receive the crown of life. But woe to those who, trusting solely on their order, shall fall into tepidity, for they will not be able to support the temptations permitted for the proving of the elect. Those who preserve their fervor and adhere to virtue with love and zeal for the truth will suffer injuries and persecutions as rebels and schismatics, for their prosecutors, urged on by evil spirits, will say that they are rendering a great service to God by destroying such pestilent men from the face of the earth. But the Lord will be the refuge of the afflicted and will save all those who trust in him. And in order to be like the head, Christ, those, the elect, will act with confidence, and by their death will purchase themselves eternal life. choosing to obey God rather than man. They will fear nothing, and they will prefer to perish rather than consent to falsehood and perfidy. Some preachers will keep silent about the truth, and others will trample it underfoot to deny it. Sanctity of life will be held in derision even by those who outwardly profess it. For in those days Jesus Christ will send them not a true pastor, but a destroyer. Is Francis I inadvertently signaling what he will be in the future? The Malachi prophecy doesn't necessarily state that the last pope is an apostate, but this one certainly does, as well as the book of Revelation in describing the false prophet. It's no secret that even today, groups of Catholics believe that the Pope during the tribulation will be an instrument of the Antichrist. Malachi predicts the city of Rome's destruction in the time of Petrus Romanus. Revelation talks about the destruction of Mystery Babylon, and the third secret of Fatima predicts the death of a pope in a half-ruined city. Because of this, Pope Francis may not be Petrus Romanus. Some have suggested that there would be a pope between Benedict and Petrus Romanus. He may be this pope, the pope that is killed. If the three prophecies concerning the Catholic popes are accurate, we are definitely near the time of the end. The third secret of Fatima is alleged by the Catholic Church in May of 2000 to have been fulfilled by the assassination attempt upon Pope John Paul II. Malachi Martin, a Jesuit priest and author of many books dealing with the Catholic Church, disagrees with this interpretation and suggested a cover-up of the real secret. In the end, the proof of any prophecy is its accuracy. Time will soon prove if Pope Francis I is the last pope. Being 76 years old, events will play themselves out within 1 to 20 years, at most. And with the speed at which events around the world are unfolding, it seems likely the answers are just around the corner. Thank you for your interest in this show, and may God bless and keep you.
The Revelation 13 podcast is hosted by Mike Hopwood and is a podcast dedicated to the study of end-time events, news events, and ancient mysteries.